Alright, welcome back to this tutorial series on Stellaris. It's been a while since we've done one of these, but there has been some major updates in 1.8 that you should be aware of, specifically in the realm of sector management. Now, the original sector management video is over a year old now, so it's time to readdress this subject. There's been a lot of changes. Some of them apply still, some of them do not, and so let's go through this, shall we? I've set up this this galaxy over here. We are playing as the United Nations of Earth, the perfect starter nation for any player. And yeah, you were also playing with hyperlanes, but that is not important towards this particular discussion. First of all, as you can see on the screen, we are 100 years into the game, and most importantly, a direct controlled colonized systems modifier is currently really bad. Why? Because we are 15 planets, yes, 15 planets over our controlled systems cap. The controlled systems cap is basically the modifier that allows you to control as many planets as you can directly. Now, this is changed by doing research as well as doing a bunch of traditions. Specifically, finishing the expansion tree will get you an additional 2 core sector systems, which you can then mess around with. One thing that's really important to notice, however, is that we are way over our cap and we need to do something about this. How do we do something about this? We use sectors. Now, sectors are controlled through the following ways. We can either hit F5, which is the hotkey to get towards the planets and sectors screen, or we can go towards planets and sectors underneath the more drop-down. Now, as you can see, I have not been actively developing my my planets all that well, at least in terms of orbital development, but that is not important for now. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a bunch of these planets to a sector. Now, we have a sector limit. This is not all that important, as I have yet to run into any situation where sector limits are applicable. Well, so let's create a new sector. So what do sectors actually do? Sectors are a early to mid-game function that allows you to have more territory without having to micromanage as much. It's basically the step from a 4X game into a grand strategy game with governors, etc. And the governors all have their own goals, and you can set up the sectors pretty much in any way you want in order to reach that goal for them. You obviously need to select those governors, but that's a whole different discussion. So, as we've selected the Create a New Sector button, we'll come towards this interface. As you can see, there is 2 different colors here. There is the red with an X in it, and there is a green. Green means that there is a planet in that system. It also means that those planets can be put into a sector. The only planet that cannot be put into a sector is your capital world. In this particular case, it's Earth in the Sol system. There's Mars, of course, there as well, but that's a whole different question. So right now, we are thinking by ourselves, okay, what is the best way of adding these planets to sectors? Well, there's two schools of thought here. You can either add just the planets to a sector, or you can add an entire area into a sector. Now, there's 2 reasons why you would do either. First of all, you want to control as many resources as you can. If you put resources into a sector, those resources will be pooled into that sector. Just like you having your energy and mineral count, every single sector has their own little pool of resources when it comes to energy and minerals. Food does not really apply towards this. If you add any sort of sector, any sort of system to a sector, that resource gets added to a pool. Now, obviously, you can set the sector output, as in the amount of resources they produce, to add towards your own pool. This maxes out at 75% a month. Goes all the way down to 0, but you kind of get the idea there. From my perspective, adding as the least amount of systems towards a sector is really good for you, as long as you keep on developing those sectors and actively pour money into them. And we'll get to that very shortly. Now, first of all, on the other hand, there is also the school of thought of just add as many as you can, because you can take those resources out of the sector at some point anyway by spending influence. I don't necessarily agree with that, because It's expensive, it's a workaround, and I'd rather have access to the resources myself. So, let's create a sector, shall we? Well, as we see, we're on the screen, and we can click one of the planets. Let's click on a planet, and we will see that this little thing is being set up. Immediately, we get the sector missing resource icon. It means that this sector is not producing enough energy to sustain itself, and will be running at a deficit, which is bad for the sector. How can we change this? Well, it's very easy. We go and add another planet to that sector. Right now we have the choice between adding either this planet or that planet. In this particular scenario, I would like to add this planet. And there's a good reason for this. Why? Because of this tundra world that is over here. I don't have enough resources to actively colonize this planet, and that is a problem. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add it to a sector and then set the sector in such a way that it will colonize the planet by itself, adding it to the sector and develop it over time. We also want to add the next planet towards the sector. And now we're a little bit of a annoying spot. Which planet, or at least which system, do we add to the sector? Obviously, like we said before, we want to add the least amount of resources towards the sector that are not attached to planets in that particular system. So, thankfully, we've got a system over here that doesn't have any resources in it. And this one as well, of course. We can click on this, and as you can see, it connects just nicely. We can avoid adding Omicron Persei and keep those resources to ourselves. We can do this, and we add this, and we add this one. And we're doing quite nicely here because we're adding planets very, very efficiently. Now, at this point, you can make the choice by adding these two planets to a sector and basically let the sector develop itself. If you're in a very young sector where the planets themselves need a lot of guidance and a lot of development, just leave these two alone and just do micromanage themselves into the place that they need to be and then add them to the sector later on. If this is a well-developed sector with all the planets having a ton of resources, just add them and they will colonize themselves. Right now, we still have an 80 energy deficit. Actually, it's not a deficit because it's in the plus now. Thank you, Hope, for messing that one up. And it looks like we do not really have a way to efficiently build continue building our sector. So we're going to close that interface and leave this sector for what it is. We want to keep these planets, these 5 at least, in a core sector. Those are the planets you directly control. You want to keep those close to you because obviously that's where you're going to be producing most of your ships from. Let's create a new sector, shall we? Let's go here and go down here. Click on this stuff. It looks like we're having some problems here in terms of adding this planet because there's no direct connector. We could add this 8 mineral patch towards the sector, but why would we? So let's add this 2. Let's do this one, and we can now have a nice free route to add towards this sector. Obviously, this doesn't look the cleanest, but it's a good way of making sure those resources are added nicely. When it comes to science with sectors and planets, it doesn't really matter. The science automatically gets added to your pool. If it's just science, doesn't matter. Just throw them in there if it's a nice connector. Get that one done. That's good. We can add Onab. That's good. Where is our final planets? We have 2 more. They're up here. And considering how far they are away, let's close this one. Let's create another sector. We're way below our limit. And let's add these 2. So now we have the choice of should we add some of these other planets to give this sector a little bit more resources? That is completely up to you. If you feel that these planets need a little bit more development, you can either add more planets to the sector, or you can do the following. And let's follow along with this, shall we? Sadly, we cannot directly click on the sector name to take us there, but that is sadly the case. And as you can see now, we're now nicely at the 5 margin for our colonized system sectors, which is awesome. We can go over here. Now, this is a serendipity sector. We can click on this button right here, and we find ourselves in the planets and sectors management menu again. Once again, you can hit F5 to get there as well. As you can see, in serendipity, they have plus 19 energy and plus 27 minerals. This means they have enough resources to continuously develop this sector. What we can, however, do, if we want to speed up that process, we can add resources to this sector by clicking on either of these buttons. If we hit Control, we will add 1,000 extra. Just like that. So basically right now I've given a big chunk of my economy to this sector to give them the ability to develop themselves. However, this is not necessary at all, because we can just go into the sector itself, click on the planet, and find out that yes, we can directly control anything that's down here. Previously, before 1.8, this was not possible. Basically, you would need to let the governors do their thing, the AI was a little bit messy, and you would end up with sectors that were not the best developed, let's put it that way. And now in 1.8, you can directly interact with sectors and their planets to manually steer them into the right path, so to speak. But let's say that you do want to do some stuff with your sector and let it run by itself. Well, let's go and click on this button once again and basically say, I want to change something about the sector settings here. That's fine. You click on the sector settings button, or you can go towards this button right here that will open up the same menu. And basically what happens here is you can set the sector settings. So let's just do it like this, and it looks a little bit cleaner. Basically, you can give the sector certain rules to work around. Basically saying, hey, if you want to build military stations on your own budget, that's fine by me. Basically, if you tick this box, the sector will start building construction ships whenever they have resources available and start building military stations throughout the sector in any sort of place they can. Which is kind of cool. It allows for automatic defensive perimeters being built, which is rather useful. Space construction, it's the same thing there. It allows for the construction of spaceports, orbital stations, and ships. If you want military stations, you will kind of also need to have this tagged, or else no construction ships will be built. Then we have the ability to colonize, and as we know from over here, from this sector, what we said earlier, this sector, for instance, had the opportunity to add 2 planets to it. So if I had added these 2 planets to this sector and I hit the colonize button, the planet will proactively try to colonize these planets. Right now it has the option to colonize this one as well, and it will do so if it has the resources. Then there is the respect tile resources button. This is actually really important. As we click on the planet down here, the little planet button, which basically allows us to rotate between the various planets. The planets themselves have core resources. And let me quickly find one. So this terrain tile over here has a base resource of 1 energy. This is what the game refers to when it comes to respect tile resources. It means that the game, if this is ticked, it will always try to build an energy building on towards this tile. This applies to any sort of base resource. Whether or not it's Betharian stone, whether or not it's minerals, whether or not it's science, it will always try to build a building on top of that tile to quote-unquote respect that tile resource. Then there is redevelopment, and we will get to that very shortly. And then we have robots. Robots is fairly straightforward. It means the sector will spend resources in order to build robots on the various planets. So let's quickly loop back towards redevelopment. So redevelopment is actually kind of important because it focuses on the system, the sector focus itself. Now, the sector focus, what it means is that basically you can set a certain path for your sectors. There's 5 of them. There is the financial focus. So basically your sector will be focusing on generating energy credits. There is the research focus. Obviously, it will focus on research then. Mineral focus, or industrial focus, where it will generate minerals. Food focus, where it will focus on producing food. You probably don't want this one. And there is the balanced one where it will take all 4 into account and try to build appropriately. Now, where does redevelopment come into? Well, what this means is if you have this box ticked, it will always try to rebuild the sector to be more focused on one of your objectives. So basically, if you have this ticked, the sector will actively try to rebuild itself to go in towards the direction of one of these. Personally, I am not a fan, especially when you do not have the respect tile resources set and you have, for instance, a bunch of planets that are really focused on minerals, and you have, for instance, financial focus set. It will pave over all those minerals in favor of energy, which is not a very good way of doing things. Overall, I am not a big fan of redevelopment, and I tend to turn that off. Regardless, that is, in terms of setting up your sectors, pretty much it. There is one more thing that we need to talk about, and that is these Actually, there's two things. There is this one right here, which is adding a leader to your sector. Now, leaders come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some of them are resilient, which means they will live longer. Some of them are adaptive, which means they are a lot cheaper. Oh, actually, this is the no, it's the cheaper one. Then there is the army veteran, which will reduce cost of army build speed and health. Retired fleet officers, which reduces the ship costs that are being built in that sector. We got scientists, which increase the science output in a sector by 10%. That one in particular is very, very good. As well as there is leaders that will lower the cost of tile blockers and stuff like that. If you don't have a lot of tile blockers, it's not really necessary. I generally like to steer away from those myself. However, we always need a leader in a sector, no matter what the cost. In this particular case, let's turn this sector into a military sector. So let's recruit a governor here. It will cost us 40 influence. We have +8 influence right now, which is crazy town good. Let's click on our leader, and our leader will automatically be assigned to this sector. So if we look right here at the skill level of said governor, it's 1 out of 5. It goes all the way up to 10 if you go for the right techs as well as biological traits, civics, and traditions. Basically, what this means is the higher the level of the leader, the better it is at some of these actions, like population resource production, or building speed, or blocker time reduction, that sort of thing. It's also very important if you've just conquered a alien species that you put them into a sector and add a high-level governor to it, because a high-level governor will reduce the amount of unrest that a species generates, especially when they have been freshly conquered, etc. So we want to have as many governors in our sectors as we possibly can, because we want to A, level them because of the bonuses that they generate, and B, yeah, having high-level leaders is always very good. Your core sector, which is the planets you initially receive, will have one whole governor all by itself. So all of these guys, all these planets, can have one governor, which is great because in previous versions of the game, that wasn't the case. Every single planet would need its own individual governor, which meant that you would have a million friggin' governors in your leader cap, which wasn't particularly efficient, especially if you wanted to try to explore, and scientists would be rather scarce, so that was a problem. So all of these planets are now being governed by the same governor, which is this guy, Claude Bouchard. What a guy, what a man. But yeah, that basically is it when it comes to setting up your sectors, as well as getting your governors into it and why it is important to do so. Now we get to a subject that we've kind of already touched on earlier on, but I kind of want to loop back onto. And that is the resource pile inside your sector. This is a little bit more advanced, so we're going to go and dive right in. Let's go and click on the sector. So the resources from a sector are being added to the sector pool on a month-by-month basis. In this particular case, 43 energy is being put in and 68 minerals are being put in. This is being controlled by these two sliders. Right now, 50% of their resources are being put into a sector, and 50% are being added to your pile. This can be increased to 75% so that you get more of these resources and they get less. You can set it to 0 if you want to proactively develop this sector by giving them more resources. Obviously, you won't get anything out of it, and right now, considering they are in the plus, it's not really relevant. So in general, I like to set this to 75 unless the sector needs a little bit of love. However, you may think by yourself, well, there's a sector down here, and it's got a bunch of resources in its pool. I want those resources. They're just sitting there. I'm about to go to war, and those resources are not being used for anything. Well, that's why there's this button, which is the Drain Sector Stockpile button. Basically, what it does is it takes 75% from the sector stockpile, i.e. these resources, and puts them into your main pool. So if we click this right now, we get the Drain Sector Stockpile, drain 75% of the sector stockpile, transferring this amount of resources from your Empire stockpile at a cost of 100 influence, a base cost of 100. As far as I know, there is no way of influencing this except for one very specific scenario. So as you can see, we got 440 influence. We're getting 8 a month, which is a gargantuan amount. So let's click this button, and we got those resources, and 75% have been moved here and moved over here. There's another scenario that applies to this. So let me quickly tag into another empire. So we're currently playing as these guys down here. So these guys, they feel, you know what, those Earthlings, those guys from Sol, they need a good old slapping. So we're gonna go and declare war on them. I want to take everything. 74% war score. Whatever, man. Let's do it. So let's tag back into our empire. We're back on Earth, and as you can see, we're currently at war. We're obviously at war with the Authority of Opalog, which is a problem. However, thankfully, our sectors are coming to the rescue. Let's quickly check our sector overview, and as you can see, if we would like to drain our sector stockpile, the cost in influence has now been reduced to 25. What this means is, in general, if you can, you can basically remove those resources for only 25 influence instead of 100. This is great, and it only applies if you're in a defensive war. So if you are being attacked from somewhere and you need a quick cash injection into your economy, all you got to do is go to Sector C, which one has a giant pile of money, and these pools can get pretty ridiculous. 22,000 energy and 25,000 minerals. I'm not kidding. That's how big they get. Taking out 75% of those resources for a cost of 25 influence is amazing, and you should absolutely do it. So let's do it. We get those resources. It only costs 25% and all 25% influence, and yeah, we get a bunch of resources for it. It's a great way of dealing with this. So to recap, sectors, they're designed to make sure that you do not go over your directly controlled colonized systems cap. It is the effective gateway from a strategy game to a quote-unquote grand strategy game, and lowers the amount of micromanagement that you have to do. If, however, you still want to micromanage, you can just click on this little planetary icon down here, go to the surface, and you can directly interact with these planets if you so please, even if there is a governor already available. So micromanagement is there for those that want to do it. Then there is, of course, the management of a sector. Always make sure that you have as little systems in there as possible. The less resources there are in a sector, the better. Then we have the sector settings. Obviously, you want to very much inspect these. I highly recommend going for balance because I like to micromanage my sectors. And of course, how could we forget the drain sector stockpile item? Finally, always put governors in your sector. I hope this was useful to you. It's been a while since we did one of these tutorials, and it's good to be back. The game has been changing quite a lot, and expect more of these in the future as Cherry is on the horizon, and I'm sure that will be coming out sometime next year. In the meantime, feel free to subscribe if you like this video, and of course there is more tutorials on the channel for you to enjoy, and most of them are particularly still relevant. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take good care of yourselves, and as always, each other.